Now let's talk to Carol Roth. She is a former investment banker. She's an expert and advisor on small business. She's a commentator on Fox News, CNN, CNBC, and elsewhere. Now on Twitter, you can find her at Carol J.S. Roth, where she's somewhat famous for her big hair Fridays, always a favorite of mine. And Carol's latest book is You Will Own Nothing. That's out. We're going to find out when it's coming and from what publisher. And welcome, Carol. Want to hear all about your new book. Please start us off by giving us the elevator pitch. What are you saying in You Will Own Nothing?
Sure, Dennis. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And, You Will Own Nothing is obviously a nod to the World Economic Forum's top 8 predictions for 2030. Number 1 prediction, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Which, when I first heard about this, as so often happens on social media, you hear something and you're like, I'm sure that's not exactly what was said, right? The World Economic Forum is connected to the political elite, the business elite. Like, I'm sure they're not advocating or predicting the end of private property. There must be something wrong here. So, of course, it didn't take me very much research, but I did my research as I always do. And sure enough, there in a video with a smiling, handsome young man's face is that prediction, along with a host of other ones, which are frankly scary and get a little bit glossed over. But as I did some research, it certainly wasn't the first time that they advocated for that, which if you follow the World Economic Forum at all, you'll see that they do this a lot. They take really bad ideas, they put them out there, they fail to land, and they repackage them until they sort of hit. And so this idea of, that you won't have any ownership of anything really started, I think it was back in 2016 with an article and some videos about, can you rent everything in your life? And as somebody who's been in the financial media, and Dennis, you've been in even longer than I have, you know that the foundation of wealth for individuals is asset ownership of things that have the opportunity to maintain or hopefully appreciate in value. So the idea that all of a sudden you're saying no private property, no opportunity to participate in wealth, that becomes a bit concerning. And so what I go into in the book is the fact that we are on the precipice of a new financial world order, which again sounds very conspiratorial, but is not. And we can certainly talk about this later, but these things go in cycles, and the US's cycle is getting a little long in the tooth. And everybody who is smart and well-connected and in the elite circle knows this. They talk about this openly. And what they're telegraphing to us is that they are jockeying to try to control this new scenario and make sure that they come out on top as the global financial stakes shift, and in the process, leave us with nothing. So I explore all the different ways this happens, from social credit, CBDCs, ESG, the debasement of our currency, corporations competing with you for single family homes, the biggest possible wealth heist to ever occur coming down the pike. And then most importantly, I give you a plan to fight back, because it's not acceptable to me. They may want you to own nothing, but I want you to own everything.
Some very prominent global activists on the behalf of the world's poor say that the fastest way to fix that would to be let people own property, that ownership, again, is the way to fight poverty. So you're into a great gold mine here.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, if you think about the change in history, the late Tom Bethel, really, smart, insightful writer, he talked about the way that property transmission shifted, and that with the protection of property rights really created the shift in the system. It used to be that property was shifted and transmitted what he would call vertically, right? It would pass down from wealthy families to the sons, and that's how that wealth got transferred. But with the advent of both technology and then the protection of property rights, people were able to trade amongst each other, and that created a horizontal transmission of wealth. So now it wasn't just the kings and their sons getting wealthy, but you and I, if we had things that were of value, we could trade amongst each other, get new things, make those investments, have some land, and then over time, obviously businesses and intellectual property, and now financial investments, other kinds of things that would allow us to participate. And as you said, having that, and with the protection of property rights, something that we like to refer to as capitalism, although that gets bastardized all the time, has lifted more people out of poverty around the globe than any other system. And, frankly, over the last, call it 60, 70 years, has lifted, the majority of the world out of extreme poverty. So it really is the idea, if you go back through history, the people who haven't had ownership, they're pretty much not free and they're pretty much not happy. So it becomes kind of a scary thing that people are talking about this casually. And, so many forces, even, big tech, which I didn't mention before, coming in and trying to make your life a subscription or a service. All of this kind of comes together. And if we were just fighting one thing, it would be challenging. But the fact that they're all coming at us at the same time really means that we need to empower ourselves with the knowledge of what's happening and really work hard individually, but standing together to fight back.
Now, is this your third book?
I'm a glutton for punishment. I swore after the first one that would be the end. And then, of course, I was
Entrepreneurial Equation in 2010, which I saw was a bestseller on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. Man, I envy that. I admire that. That's good. And then you had The War on Small Business, which I thought was really well timed because government is just crushing the most important growth component of the economy, right? And now comes this one, You Will Own Nothing, which, as you can tell, I like the title. And that's coming out. What publisher and the official publish date? Is that already out? Or
yes, so it is. I'm with HarperCollins again, who did my last book, and that comes out July 18th. But it's already available for pre-order, and the reception has been amazing. I've been blown away how many people really want to dig into this topic. We've already, a couple months before release, spent 3 days on Amazon's top 100. So I'm very, very excited that people are willing to learn about this, because all I can do is put the information out there, but you really have to dig in as an individual and read it. And I know that you will be reading it soon as well, Dennis.
I sure will. And before we move on, let me say to the listeners out there, guys, Carol Roth's new book is You Will Own Nothing, but I always will owe Carol Roth, because it turns out late 2021 was the first time Carol said, "Hey, you want me to introduce you to some people over at this podcast platform, Ricochet?" And it took me the better part of another year or more, even 2 years, before finally I started getting and going on this. And so one thing for listeners is, if you are working on reinventing yourself, plan less, do more. I should have moved in as soon as Carol Roth set me up. And the second thing is, I owe Carol Roth, and I thank you so much. And one day you will come to me and ask me for a favor, and I must do this favor.
Well, as I think this is a good takeaway for people, is just do right by your friends, right? I mean, that's all it is. It's good karma. Obviously, I love the folks at Ricochet. I had a podcast with Ricochet for quite some time. I know I will shout out your producer. I love your producer. Love you as a human being, Dennis. And so this is what you do. I always, when I get opportunities or I hear of things, if they're not for me, I try to find somebody in my network that they're going to work for. To me, right. That's what you do as a connector, as somebody who wants people to succeed. And as you know, the pie is not fixed. There's opportunity for everyone. And the more of us that can be successful, is that rising tide, lifts all boats. So that's my philosophy.
That's a wonderful philosophy. And I love that, Carol. And let's take a break from your book for a minute, because I want to hear more. But I just want to get your take, just as a regular American, because you call yourself a moderate, although I could swear, given your love of capitalism and small business, sounds conservative to me. But just in the past week, I was gone fishing. I was in the Keys with two friends of mine for the past 30 years. A wonderful time. I even caught a tarpon for the first time in my life. And it's like
congrats.
Connected to this prehistoric creature. It was just amazing. All right. But in that time I was away, Carol, we had the Durham probe showing the Hillary Clinton campaign, set up the entire Russiagate Conspiracy, Obama knew it, Biden knew it, the FBI knew it, they investigated anyway. We have members of the Biden family taking payoffs while he was vice president. You got your whistleblower on the IRS investigation, the disappearance of witnesses. You got Blinken, now our Secretary of State, orchestrating, I think we talked about this 2 episodes ago on the pod, maybe episode 24, orchestrating the liar letter by 51 former spooks insisting that the Hunter laptop was disinformation. Your thoughts on any and all of this, Carol?
So I have 2 different trains of thoughts, and we can certainly go into either or both. The first one is just the utter disgust that I feel about the different approaches to justice. There's not a 1-tier justice system. There's a 2-tier justice system. And depending on what letter you have after your name, whether it's a D or an R, you get treated very, very differently. And I think I want people who do bad things to be accountable for them. But I want that standard to be applied fairly across everyone, not cherry picked when it suits a narrative. So that's kind of the first piece.
Yeah.
The second piece is, and again, it's so hard to not be a conspiracy theorist these days, because everything that happens just sounds insane. And if you talked about it 10 years ago, it would have just seemed out of the realm. And today, based on the real evidence that we have, it's just not conspiratorial. But the fact that Donald Trump, whether, whatever it is that you think about him, but the fact that he has been targeted so hard and so often from, the time that he was a candidate to now when he's, no longer in office, the number of times and the number of different ways that they have gone after this man makes one really think that there is a deep state and that there is an agenda, and that somebody who's outside of the system that is not willing to conform with the broader agenda must be taken down in some way. Because, again, whatever you think of Donald Trump, even if you think he's a bad person, the level of what he's done or purported to have done is certainly not any worse. And I could make the argument that there are lots of examples that are worse than anybody else who has held a similar office or other big offices. And so, these 2 things as an American don't give me a lot of comfort.
That's very well said. I remember, might have been in the opening moments of the 2016 campaign, when Trump first came down that escalator at Trump Tower, and he said this stuff about immigrants are not bringing their best here, and they're rapists and murderers, some of them, et cetera, all that controversy. And shortly after, Trump came out and said, they're spying on my campaign. And this was related to that Carter, whatever that guy's name was, and the FISR surveillance court stuff.
Yeah.
And CNN came out with a page 1 landing page web piece immediately saying Trump makes false claim, straight out, that's false, that they're spying on his campaign. And now, years later, look at all the incredibly inappropriate, unconstitutional, treasonous things that went on. Just a couple more questions in this area, Carol. Do you think that this is impeachment worthy? Because really, if Biden's family members got payoffs when he was vice president, that's not high crimes and misdemeanors while you're president of the United States.
I mean, listen, again, I think one of the challenges that we have in this country is that we don't have accountability. There is moral hazard that is running rampant throughout every level of the government, because they tell us that our recourse is, oh, well, you can vote them out of office. That's the recourse. And that's not really good recourse, when they have such a large purview. It wasn't imagined that the federal government would be the size and have the scope that it does today. And so certainly, any sort of remedies for that were never put in place because it wasn't imagined to get to where we are today. And so the fact that, you don't have accountability for things like potentially getting kickbacks or, having, these special deals, when especially that if it's somebody else does it, they are coming towards you and they're going to try and take you down. I think it's bad, but in terms of Biden's impeachment, there's so many things that he's done that I think are even more worthy of impeachment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that, when he swore his oath of office, like every other president, he swore to uphold the Constitution. And there have been several actions that he's taken that he's known are blatantly unconstitutional, and has, kind of alluded to the fact that, well, I don't think it's going to get to the courts in time, or it's going to be a longer process. And so we'll just kind of let it play out. And so he's kind of, in my opinion, knowingly abused that power and not upheld the Constitution and been playing games. And I think that is, the most impeachable offense, because that's what he swore an oath to protect.
And 10 or 15 years ago, I feel like the press might have done a far better job of stepping in there to try to counter that or point that out. But today, most of the media are just so in the lap of the Democrats. It's just a
lapdogs. They're lapdogs.
Yeah, lapdogs instead of watchdogs. That's a very good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now let's veer more back into your new book. You Will Own Nothing, out in July, but on available for order now. One related element, perhaps, is this idea of a government central digital currency. So I've been watching this rise of digital currency as if the government will come in and say, we have a Bitcoin that's better than Bitcoin, let everybody use it, and then cash disappears. I read a research article on this. And once cash disappears, now we no longer can hide any purchase. Is this a part at all of this idea of you will own nothing?
It absolutely is. So I have an entire chapter that's devoted to central bank digital currencies, because it's an area that not enough people know about. And frankly, it's an area that they're trying to confuse and conflate a number of issues on in order to gain more power and control for themselves. So just to clarify, a central bank digital currency is a currency that's issued by a central bank, and it is a digital form factor of whatever fiat currency they issue. So for the Federal Reserve in the US, it would be a digital dollar, or a digital US dollar.
Which sounds good at first.
I mean, in a sense, it doesn't sound much different, right? We use Visa, and we do a lot of transactions, PayPal and Venmo. We do a lot of things digitally. What could go wrong? The challenge, and where they're conflating interest with cryptocurrency, is the centralization versus the decentralization factor. The reason cryptocurrency, or at least the main reason why it's so popular and there's so many people who believe in it, is because they believe that the Federal Reserve, alongside the government, has been negligent and indulgent and destructive with their monetary policy, which they have. They have destroyed the purchasing power of the dollar. They have not kept it stable for the good of our country, or as a reserve currency for the good of the world. Pretty amazing that they haven't been able to do either, but that's the reality of the situation. And so the thought is that having, one entity with so much power and so much control over the monetary system really creates an issue, because we're being productive. They are creating a proxy for our productivity, and then they are destroying it. And so you have to do more to basically be able to have the same level of purchasing power. And, that is deteriorating rapidly. So the Bitcoins of the world emerged as a way to counteract that by having a decentralized cryptocurrency that nobody owns and nobody's in charge of, and it's on a public ledger that everyone can see, and it's not in anyone's hands. Now you can make some arguments about some of the issues there, but let's just leave that as it is. So what the governments around the world, frankly, are doing is they've looked at that and they said, okay, well, people are interested in that. Let's do our own, but we're going to fully own it, which, again, full ownership and full control and power is completely at odds with that foundation of decentralization for crypto. We'll call it a digital currency, and it'll confuse people who don't know enough about blockchains and the centralization, the difference, to think it's the same thing, but it's more safe because it's not just, scammers out in the world who are doing this, but it's your trusty US government and the trusty Federal Reserve that's done such a great job in managing your money, but let's give them more power. And the scary thing about this, Dennis, is the capability, as you said, for complete transparency. They could take Let's just hold up a Federal Reserve note here, and imagine we have a microchip that's implanted in this. So you go to make a transaction, and the microchip, they're actually tracking this specific dollar, and they know Carol has this dollar, and they say, Carol, I know you like burgers, but you've had too many this month, and burgers are bad for the environment. So we're just going to shut off access to your dollars because it doesn't align with the agendas that we are pushing. And they could do that based on social credit. If you say something bad about the government based on their agendas. And I know people are going to go, yeah, but they can't really do that. Can they not? We've just lived through COVID. We've seen the mandates. We've seen people be called essential and non-essential. We've seen businesses shut down. We've seen all of, people fired from their jobs. You can't enter a restaurant. Like, you really think that they're not going to go ahead and try to do this, whether they are supposedly allowed to or not? Of course they are. That the power and control element is too hard for them to pass up. If you control the money, you control the people. And the reality is, at this point, given the level of debt we have in this country, they are desperate. They need to do something. The current trajectory is not working. They are not going to cut back on their promises because that takes away their power. They want more promises. They want more spending. So things that they might do is they may say, hey, Dennis, I know you're not a huge fan of the idea of a digital currency. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 4 digital dollars for every dollar that you turn in. Now, you, Dennis, are going to say, well, doesn't that just devalue all of my dollars? But the average person is go, wait, I get 4? It's amazing. It's the same thing they did with stimulus. Oh, I want my $1,000 stimulus check, not realizing that that was going to cost them $6,000, $7,000 a year for the rest of their lives. They're going to do the same thing here. They may tie it to UBI. They may tie it to them controlling inflation. But at the end of the day, it is the end of your freedoms. It is the end of your ability to transact freely. And this is the end of the American dream as we know it. So we need to push back against this in major ways. And, as I said, I go through the whole thing and then, give some ideas on that as well.
Folks, you hear that silence right there? Because there is simply nothing better that I could add to what Carol Roth just told us. That is fantastically argued. Getting ready for the dismount here. We're coming around to the final lap here. And Carol, what can the average American do about any of this? The problems you're raising and the concerns you're raising in your new book, You Will Own Nothing.
So I have an entire chapter devoted to fighting back because it's not, enough to just tell everyone the problem. You do need to give a solution. And I think that this is very overwhelming for people. Like, the reality is, you're not going to be able to stop a new global world order from forming. Like, we're just individually, you're not. We might be able to slow it down somewhat, but it's a cycle of history. It's going to happen. So the reality is that you got to do what you can do to protect yourself and to protect your community. And so there are
your own circle near you. Okay.
Exactly. And there are behavioral and financial shifts that you can make so that you do have more ownership, that you have an ownership, frankly, in some form factors that you can control. CBDC won't be here tomorrow, but there will be some clear signposts along the way. And so for something like that, you need to be thinking about what kind of a medium of exchange can I use in an alternate society, because I'm still going to want to do the things that I want to do, and I'm not going to want my dollars to be devalued. So is it owning some precious metals? Is it having more skills or more products that I can use for barter? Is it having productive land? Things that I can actually control that are outside of this circle of and sphere. Things like, really having these strong community members that you can trade with and that who are going to protect your livelihood. One piece of this is social credit, and something like a CBDC marry very well. When they come after you because of wrongthink, like they did during COVID, and try to take away your opportunities or your livelihood, do you have people around you who are going to stand up and go, screw that. Or do you have the neighbor who's going to be the first one to turn you in? So, there's a behavioral aspect to this and a financial aspect. And that's what people really need to, kind of get up to speed on and really change the way that they transact and change the way that they think about things and change their behaviors. And some of it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but the reality is better to do that now and be prepared than be caught completely off guard and be at the whim of the government or whatever powers that be.
Well, Carol, also the Chinese government already is doing the social credit thing. They're already punishing people for their behavior or their comments by restricting their purchases. And we've got JP Morgan Chase right here, I think it is, who says, oh, we're not going to allow you to use our Visa card to buy a gun, even though owning a gun is a constitutional right of this country. So the creeping in on this already is beginning, and that digital currency will make it worse. One extra thing you haven't mentioned, I mean, even though you lose the upside of it, is to hoard cash. Someday, if cash ever disappears, I want to make sure I have thousands and thousands of actually hard currency hidden away somewhere, just in case.
For what? So if they've devalued the currency and you have, are these collector's items like the Zimbabwe? This is why you need precious metals. Like, have something that has a 5,000 year social contract. Like if they devalue this and this is worth like 2 cents.
It's so illiquid gold. You can't really use it to purchase anything. You can't, and if we had some big Armageddon.
So here's the thing. This is why you need to you can get gold. I mean, I'm not saying to get like a bunch of giant bars. Those are great for stores of value, but you need to get them in different denominations. They do sell smaller coins and fractional, both of gold and silver. And you need to have that form factor. If you go to Venezuela, right, where they completely screwed up their entire economy and went from being the 4th most prosperous economy in the world to the hellhole they are today, how do you think they go in and they pay for medical services? They pay for that with gold and silver. Wow. So I know it sounds crazy, but and again, that's the worst case scenario, but you need to be thinking about those things. And that's why if you're thinking about it as a medium of exchange, it's different than as a store of value. Store of value, big form factor is great. But if you're exchanging for someone, nobody's going to make change for you. That's the old saying, trade my kingdom for a horse, right? No, there's no change happening there. So you want to make sure you have different denominations, because again, this is going to be a reset period. Eventually there will be a new order and things will shift, just like, by the way, happened before our reign with the British Empire and before that with the Dutch Empire. And there's periods and, from British to US, it took like 15 years to get that sorted out. So this is about getting you through that tough period and also making sure that you preserve your hard-earned wealth.
That sounds like a great place to come to a conclusion of this conversation. Carol Roth, author of the forthcoming You Will Own Nothing, and you're going to be happy about it. Thank you so much for your time and being with us. And we got to have you back on in July, right? When you hit the bestseller list with this baby. Okay.
Oh, you're very kind. Would love anytime, Dennis, anytime.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol, and have a glorious day.
You too.